we've been looking at this theme of head, heart, and rather inelegantly guts. We've been talking about how we need to transform the way we see the world, the way we think, our emotions, the way we feel, and also our will, our volition, so that we have energy and strength and robustness and determination. So we've been looking at that last bit about will, energy, strength, determination for the last 2 weeks. In the first week, I introduced the figure of Vajrapani, the wielder of the Vajra, this tremendous archetypal symbol of strength and energy and bursting through the obstacles that bind us. And then last week, Vajratara talked about, more specifically about the quality of virya, the Buddhist quality of virya, energy in pursuit of the good. And how we get energy in pursuit of the good by finding what we love, and by really living from what we find most meaningful. We need plenty of energy. We need plenty of energy for effective spiritual practice. We need to free up our deep energies and our volitions, get our volitions on our side. But Buddhism is not just about personal practice, it's not just about personal change. It's also about changing the world. It's about making things happen, making good things happen in the world. And making things happen is the title of this talk, so I'm going to be talking a little bit about making things happen. And I'm going to take a slightly different approach to that. I'm going to sort of be talking in a slightly sort of mythic storytelling way about making things happen and trying to draw out some conclusions from that. I'm going to introduce I'm going to talk about 3 different figures. Briefly, Padmasambhava, who I'm going to partly talk about because he fits in so well with the themes that we've heard about in the first couple of weeks. I'm going to be talking about Swan Sun, the great Chinese traveller and translator. And if I get a chance, I'm also going to be talking about Sangharakshita, the founder of our movement, as people who made things happen and what we can learn about the way they made things happen. So Padmasambhava, very briefly, I'm partly introducing him because we're doing an urban retreat, which is why I've got my reminder on, which was given to me by you, man, which... So we have reminders to remind us that we're on retreat and to be mindful. Anyway. So we're doing an urban retreat, and Padmasambhava is our patron figure, so I'm going to say a little bit about Padmasambhava. Although most of you already know mainly about him. So very briefly, the one aspect of the story of Padmasambhava is that the king of Tibet wished to introduce Buddhism to Tibet. And so he invited a very saintly scholar, Shantarakshita, to establish a monastery in Tibet at a place called Samye. And this Shantarakshita, this scholarly, saintly figure, organised, he had the funds and he organised people to build this monastery. But strangely enough, it never seemed to get anywhere. Because what seemed to be happening was that human beings would build it every day, in the daytime, in the light, and something else knocked it down every night, undid all their work. The beings came out of the depths. If you like, the deep energies of Tibet weren't having it. They didn't want to be converted to Buddhism. And fairly obvious parallels here with sometimes what happens with us, where our best intentions are subverted by quite deep drives, sometimes by our what psychologists call our unconscious drives. But anyway, in the story, Shantarakshita eventually gives up and he goes to see the king. He says, I can't do this, king, but I know somebody who can, and that person is Padmasambhava. And Padmasambhava is a very different figure. it's not particularly respectable. It's a bit wacky, a bit scary, a bit outside the norm. But Padmasambhava does it. Padmasambhava comes to Tibet, and what he does is he converts the demons. He gets the demons on his side. All these things that were knocking the monastery down, he gets on his side. And we can see that very much as a sort of, and so these forces, these deep unconscious forces, if you like, they build the monastery by night, while the humans build it by day, and the monastery grows really quickly and is built. So, to the extent that that's a true story, Padmasambhava really made things happen. He created a Buddhist society in Tibet which lasted 1,000 years or so. But there's obvious sort of symbolic parallels with us that we often try and do the things we think we should with our conscious mind, with our rational conscious mind, but it doesn't sort of seem to happen because we're not really bringing the full force of our personality to bear. There's parts of us that just aren't on board and undo it. I talked in the first talk about Vajrapani, about us being a sort of marriage between a higher civilized human being and a wild animal. And very often what the civilized human being wants to do and what the wild animal wants to do are not the same. And if you want to use that analogy, Padmasambhava got the wild animal on his side, and all that energy was there to do what he wanted to do. And so he made things happen. So we often use that as a sort of mythic story about how we do need to get our deepest energies on our side. We can't be... Buddhism is not about being bloodless and good. We have to get our deep energies on our side. Yeah, so that sounds very good, but very often what people say about that is, yeah, but how? How? We heard a little bit about that, didn't we? We heard about how we don't ignore our wild side, you know, and we heard about that with the story of Vajrapani. We befriend it, we use its energy. As Vajratara said, we look for what we love, we respond to what we love. What we love gives us energy. We look for what brings us alive, and we respond to our love for our deepest values and our ideals by living them out. All of those things help to get that energy on our side. But tonight, I'm going to try to bring a bit of a different slant to this, a more mythic slant, and talk about two more figures who have got a very great importance to Triratna, one of them a huge importance to Triratna, who are part of our lineage of inspiration, Swansong, and if I get to it, which I might not, Sangharajta. So Tuansang is an enormously important figure in Buddhist history. He's someone who really, really made things happen. He made an epic journey from China to India against all the odds to try to find the true Dharma at a time when it was hard to find in China. He found and he mastered and he brought back a whole pack full of authentic Buddhist sutras, which he translated and disseminated, and in the process he transformed Chinese Buddhism and Chinese society. He had an enormous impact, so through that he had an enormous impact on the lives of millions of people, how many millions of people, down through the ages, which he's still having it today. So this figure here, which you probably can't see, it's very nice, this figure is a figure of Tuansang, given me by Maitridasa, at least partly, I think, partly because Maitridasa is a very generous person, and but he partly gave it to me because I was ordained at the Tuansang Retreat Centre, Borderan, near Nagpur in central India. And this retreat centre was largely financed by Chinese Buddhists from Taiwan, who to this day revere Tuansang enough to give lots and lots of money to the new Buddhists in India and name that retreat centre after Swan Sang. Very, very important figure, still down to the present day. And Swan Sang illustrates his life really illustrates clearly how we get our deepest energies on our side, working for us to make things happen. And this has to do with finding a sense of deep meaning in life, finding our deep meaning in life. Purpose, our purpose in life. It's about finding our way of making a special contribution to the universe, finding our own personal quest, if you like, our mission. Over and over again, Swan Sang seems to get communications from somewhere deeper than his own ego. It's as though there's a sort of ideal mythic version of Huan Sang hovering about in some other dimension, underneath the world, we could say, poking him. I mean, we could call it his higher self or his guardian angel, as long as we don't take those literally. The ancient Greeks would have called it his daemon. So a daemon in ancient Greece was a sort of figure that was I mean, you've probably come across them from the Philip Pullman books, but anyway, they're not quite the same, but they're a bit the same. So a daemon was a sort of figure that hovered in a different dimension and took a particular interest in you. He was your demon. And what he was about getting you to become the person you could be, the best person you could be, getting you to follow your destiny. And he would make life really difficult for you and unhappy if you didn't. And eventually, if you completely ignored your demon, he would lose interest in you, or he or she would lose interest in you, and then you were done for. You were absolutely done for. But as long as there was some hope for you, you'd get prodded by your demon, and you'd get, depressed, psychosomatic symptoms. I don't know. You get all sorts of things. You feel anxious. You just got to get on with what you're supposed to be doing. You've got to get on with growing, becoming the person you could be. Anyway, whatever it is, his demon keeps pushing and prodding him in the right direction, keeps trying to guide him towards what he could become, what he's supposed to be, what he's meant to do with his life. So because he responds to this call of a deeper dimension, he gets all sorts of help and guidance from deep forces within himself and from outside, forces we don't sort of understand. He finds all sorts of qualities in himself. He finds his energy, he finds his strength, despite being a completely unlikely person to do this, to do all of this. I mean, he's a sort of bookish, scholarly, clumsy intellectual. And yet, he makes this amazing journey. Okay, so a bit more about him. He was born in China in around the year 600 of the Christian era. And as I said, he's famous for making this epic journey to India, from China to India and back again, to find the true Dharma, because he wasn't satisfied with the Dharma that was available in India. And this epic journey took him 16 years, in which he is said to have covered 10,000 miles, or walked really 10,000 miles. It involved passing through one of the most inhospitable deserts on Earth, traversing some of the highest mountain ranges on Earth, meeting and befriending powerful kings, being kidnapped by bandits. In the process, he found a spiritual teacher who cleared up his doubts about the Dharma, and he gathered together an enormous collection of sutras and commentaries. And then he retraced his steps, taking this huge collection of writings back to China, where he was greeted as a hero and a renewer. And this is a picture of him. And he's got this backpack on. You can perhaps see the backpack. Well, that's full of sutras. That's what he's famous for. He's carrying this. You imagine that would be quite heavy, actually. You imagine that sort of full of books. So he walked all the way back from China, back to China, carrying that. It's a fly whisk, by the way. He's presumably bothered by flies when he was doing it. That's an overview, but let's have a little closer look at his life, which really bears looking at, and see what it can tell us. So, as I said, he was born around the year 600 Christian era in the province of Henan in China. And he was born into a long line of Confucian scholars and high-ranking civil servants. And he himself seemed to be very much in the family mould. He was very intelligent, quite introspective, scholarly, bookish. Spent a lot of time reading. Apparently, at the age of 8, he was already reading the Confucian classics. And his father was really, really impressed with him. My lad. His father really thought it was something. So he seemed well on his way to following the family tradition, having a distinguished career, helping to govern this huge empire of China as a civil servant, a mandarin. But then something happened that set him on a completely different course. While he was still quite young, something happened that just clicked with him about Buddhism. And he converted from Confucianism to Buddhism. And that is quite significant. That says something quite significant. Confucianism is eminent common sense. Confucianism embodies a really sensible sort of morality, which is about making mundane society work really well. You stick to tradition, you honour tradition, you honour the status quo. You do your duty to the state. And in the process, you have a comfortable, secure existence, and you accept the advantages that brings. And that's all very well as far as it goes, but it doesn't go very far spiritually. It's said that Confucius accepted that there was such a thing as spiritual reality, but he thought it was dangerous and people shouldn't have anything to do with it. It threatens common sense values, it disrupts things, it does not make for a secure and comfortable life. Ignore it. That was apparently the Confucian idea about the spiritual life. Quite sensible, actually. But Buddhism's not sensible in that way. According to Buddhism, ultimately, life is about something more than having a sensible, comfortable, respectable existence and a stable state. Life is more mysterious than that. Life has other dimensions, magical dimensions. And these might not be very convenient for solid citizens, but they are essential if we are really going to find the meaning in our life, if we're going to live in full colour, really find our destiny and what we're supposed to be doing. If we're going to find what we're really meant to do, if we're going to make things really happen. So Wan San converting from Confucianism to Buddhism means something significant. It shows him leaving behind the values of society, the society he was brought up in, and looking for a sense of meaning from something higher than that. It shows him recognising that comfort, security, stability, the common sense values of family and society are not going to make his life meaningful. So he becomes a monk, turns his back on the family tradition, becomes a monk. And this starts what we might see as a great period of preparation, a preparation for his great quest, his great adventure, in which he finds out what his talents are, he finds out what fascinates him, He finds out what he loves. He finds out what he loves. He follows his nose a bit and builds on some of his strengths. And he makes up for some of his weaknesses. It's as though he's being prepared for what he's supposed to be doing. And this period lasts until he's 27 years old. He doesn't really know what his life's supposed to be about, but he follows his nose towards what fascinates him, and that's always pointing him in the right direction. And one of the things he does during this period is travel a lot around China, all over China. He travels all over China, mainly in the company of his elder brother. He's being looked after by his elder brother, who's much more worldly wise than he is. He's not particularly worldly wise, Xuanzang, when he starts out. A civil war has broken out in China. There are places where it's really dangerous to be. You get out of there. So they're almost fleeing the violence. And that takes them to different monasteries up and down the country. But this travelling, this sort of fleeing the violence and travelling around, has quite a few positive effects on Xuanzang. For a start, it just toughens him up, gives him a spirit of adventure. By temperament, he has been this bookish intellectual. It also exposes him to a lot of different languages. There are a lot of different languages in China. And he finds that he loves languages. He loves languages. He's got a real gift for languages. So he learns languages. He learns different languages, including some of the languages of the countries he's going to travel through, and including Sanskrit. This is one of the things he loves. So again, pointing him in the right direction, pointing him to what he needs. And finally, travelling around China also takes him to a lot of Buddhist monasteries and temples, with lots of different approaches to the Dharma, and he soaks it all up. He reads everything he can get his hands on. He tries to make sense out of it all. He gets a wider perspective on the Dharma than he could have done if he stayed put. And he starts to realise that some different schools might be a bit stuck in their own narrow approach to the Dharma. He starts to realise that some of the teachings of one school seem to contradict the teachings of other schools. He starts to suspect that some of the translations into Chinese aren't that accurate, that some of the translations are a bit garbled, or maybe they're even made up. And he starts to get a really strong desire to get to the bottom of it all. He starts to get this real fascination of getting to the bottom of it all. What's the Dharma really all about? And looked at from the perspective of his later life, all this looks like a preparation. It's as though he's being prepared for what he is meant to do. It's all pointing him in that direction. So he has this period of preparation, which starts to push him in the direction of his destiny, if you like. And in the process, he gets the call, what Joseph Campbell in his book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, calls the call. Yes, his destiny calls him. That his demon pokes him, his demon sort of pokes him. It's as though his demon is saying, why don't you go to India? Hey, I dare you to go to India. If you settle down and become boring, I'm going to keep poking you in the ribs until you go to India. You're going to be a real unhappy mess unless you go to India. So he gets the idea, maybe I'll go to India. So he decides he's actually going to do it. He's going to go to India and find out what the Dharma's really about. But straight away, there's a problem. He asks the emperor's permission. In China, you have to ask the emperor's permission to leave. You have to ask the emperor's permission for lots of things. And the emperor forbids it. Not only does the emperor forbid it, he forbids anyone from travelling west towards India. So Xuanzang is stuck. Disobeying the emperor of China is not something you do lightly. So he's blocked and he's stuck. But then maybe his demon, or whatever you want to call it, gives him another prod. So in his doubt and his indecision, he's really stuck. So he decides, I'll go on to solitary retreat. I'll go into a solitary retreat. He goes into a retreat in a sacred tower, and he prays for guidance to his personal deity, Maitreya, the great loving one. And during this retreat, he has a dream. And in the dream, he sees a great mountain made of jewels in the middle of a great sea. And he feels an urge to walk towards it. And as he steps on the sea, lotuses appear under his feet so that he manages to walk across the water. Then he gets to the bottom of this mountain, and it seems impossible. And a wind blows him up to the top of the mountain. And he finds himself having thought, I can't possibly get up there. I can't get across the sea. I can't get up to the mountain. He finds himself on top of the mountain, looking out over a huge panorama of all the countries he's going to pass through. And then he wakes up from the dream with this feeling of joy and certainty, knowing that he must make this journey. And not that although it's going to be difficult, it's going to look impossible, in fact, that somehow he is meant to go, and that he's going to, if he does it, he will get the help he needs. He will get the help he needs. The lotuses will appear under his feet. The wind will blow him up the mountain. So fortified from this message, from his depths, he decides to disobey the emperor and go anyway. He decides to sneak out of China, travelling by night. And again, I think this reveals something quite fundamental about finding our purpose, doing what we're meant to be doing, becoming who we're meant to be, and that is, you can't ask for permission from authority. We can't expect authority to approve, whether authority is our parents, our family, our peer friends, our social groups, whatever group we belong to, other people at work or society in general. It is not likely to approve and give its permission. What we sometimes call the group, normal society, is interested in conformity, stability, and security, and not rocking the boat. It is interested in people fitting in, not in people becoming true individuals who are difficult. If we want approval and permission, we won't get it. If we fit in, if we want approval and permission, we will fit in and will become grey and boring. So if we want to follow Huan Sang's example and live out of this sense of deep meaning, really find what we're meant to do, we need to be willing to defy authority and convention. And that means we have to accept that it might cost. It might cost us something. In terms of security and comfort, financially and so on. Huan Sang's decision portrays that pretty vividly. Defying the emperor was not a sensible career move. Defying the emperor of China was not likely to bring a good pension in old age. Defying the emperor of China was not likely to lead to comfort at all. Defying the emperor was not a sensible thing to do at all by usual standards. But defying the emperor was exactly what Huan Sang needed to do to follow his quest, to respond to this voice from his demon, his deeper self, to become the person he is meant to be. And of course, as a result of defying the emperor, he had a far more rich life than he could have possibly had. He decided to be a good boy and stay at home, and he really made things happen. So he decides to sneak out of China. He makes his way to the far northwest, to the very edge of the Gobi Desert. A lot of things happen on the way. One of the things that happens on the way is that he's conned into buying a really grotty horse that's nearly dead. It's got its ribs sticking out. Sort of. This skinny roan horse is described as. He gets conned into buying this dreadful horse. He pays some guides to help him cross the desert, but they steal most of his stuff and then they don't turn up to help him cross the desert. He gets completely disheartened and stuck for a while, feels really depressed. He can't imagine he's ever going to make it. He decides to turn back. But then, so then he, as long as he hasn't made that final commitment, he's in real sort of turmoil and difficulty. But eventually he really pushes himself to it. He decides he's going to do it, and he finds himself at the edge of China, the end of China, the Jade Gate, the edge of the known world. He finds himself there riding a skinny, ill-roan horse that he's been conned into buying, without a guide, ready to set off alone across one of the most inhospitable deserts on earth. And this is the crucial moment, and then he does it. It's a big thing. He rides through the Jade Gate. That's the moment that he has disobeyed the emperor and made his final commitment. There's no going back now. He's an outlaw in China. He's ridden through the Jade Gate. That represents the point of no return, the point of complete commitment to his quest that he feels he's got to carry out. Before passing the Jade Gate, he could have second thoughts, go back to home, security, ordinariness. And if he'd done that, we'd never have heard of him, and he wouldn't have made things happen. But after passing the Jade Gate, there's no turning back. It's do or die. And we're told that he made a vow that he would rather die facing west than turn around and go back again. Commitment is magic. Commitment is magic. It brings out our inner resources we didn't know we have. It brings help from outside. The universe responds. So he passes the Jade Gate, and it's as though he's passed into a gate in another world where everything is vivid. Colours are brighter, sounds are clearer, everything he does matters. Deep archetypal forces are at work. This is what do or die commitment to a higher purpose does. It has magic in it, it brings the universe on our side. Of course, that's what it might look like to us all those years ago. And it might be what it looked like to Swan Sang's demon, but it isn't what it looked like to Swan Sang. What it looked like to Swan Sang was complete lunacy. Down there in the dust, in the desert, riding his skinny horse, to him it probably looked more like he was committing suicide. Here he is, this scholarly, bookish, otherworldly young man, a bit clumsy, as we see, with no experience of desert travel, riding a skinny, good-for-nothing horse and setting out across an infamously lethal desert with no guide. Yes. People don't cross the Gobi Desert on the whole. If they do cross it, they cross it in caravans with experienced guides, with camels and horses and plenty of water. Inexperienced bookish monks don't cross the Gobi Desert. Anyway, he describes the Gobi Desert. He says, "These sands extend like a drifting flood for a great distance, piled up and scattered according to the wind. Travellers leave no trace of their tracks, and often the way is lost, and they wander here and there quite bewildered, not knowing where to go. So travellers use the bones of animals and men as guides to the path. There is no water or grass to be found anywhere, and hot winds blow. And when these winds blow, beasts become confused and dazed. People become disabled. Sad and plaintive howling is heard. Sight and sound become confused. Hence there are so many who perish on the journey." Cheek. So, to Huan Sang, this probably looks like a completely hopeless thing to do, wandering off into the Gobi Desert. But he sets off, and of course, from then on, things just get worse and worse. Exactly what you would expect to happen happens. He gets lost. He gets lost. He realises that he should have come to the first oasis, the first spring that he was aiming for ages ago, but he must have missed it. He must have missed it. He's parched with thirst, so he stops for a sip of his precious water supply, and then the most terrible thing that could happen happens. The water bag falls out of his hands and all the water spills into the sand. This is the end. He can't possibly go forwards. He can't survive going back. He struggles onwards with his skinny horse for company. It's all quite hopeless. There's no water anywhere. He and his horse are parched and dying. They're completely exhausted. So he reaches this point where he's completely exhausted one evening. He prays to Avalokiteshvara for help and he goes to sleep. And then he has another dream. A tall warrior appears to him and urges him on, saying, keep going, don't give up, keep going. So he does. As soon as he wakes up, he goes onwards. And after just a few miles, his skinny horse suddenly starts to get skittish, get a new lease of life, and wants to go off in a completely different direction. So he lets it, and the horse has smelt water, and the horse finds an oasis. A shining pool of water, green oasis, he's saved. So he spends the rest of the day there drinking his fill, letting the horse drink its fill, filling up his water bag. And then after a few more days, he comes to another oasis, with people this time. And this is the oasis of Hami, the first of a string of oases at the foot of the Tian Shan Mountains. Against all the odds, he has survived, saved by his skinny horse and Avalokiteshvara. He's passed the first great challenge of his journey, although it's nearly killed him. But he seems to have really grown. He seems to have really grown from this. Maybe this is one of the things that happens being completely dedicated to a higher purpose. That's what it does to people. It makes us grow in stature. It gives presence and weight. And this seems to happen to Xuanzang. So he comes to the oasis kingdom of Tuifan, and he is welcomed with open arms by the king of Tuifan, who's a devout Buddhist. But the king seems to see something in Xuanzang that he doesn't see in other monks. Sees something very impressive. He offers him the best of everything, and then he asks him to stay. He's so impressed that he offers to make him the spiritual leader of his kingdom, to make him a rich and powerful man. But by this time, Xuanzang is not remotely tempted by the offer. He says, no, I'm not doing that. I've got a quest. I'm on a quest. And at this point, two determined, powerful personalities end up absolutely at loggerheads. The king refuses to let him leave. Xuanzang refuses to stay and be the spiritual leader of Tuifan. And eventually he decides to go on hunger strike. So Xuanzang goes on hunger strike and he nearly starves to death. And when he gets close to death, the king repents and relents. He suddenly transforms from a sort of evil tempter to a great helper and a source of riches. And Xuanzang has brought that about. He's brought that about by his commitment to follow the quest, not to trade in the gains of his quest for status and power. If we're practicing the Dharma, if we try to devote ourselves to a higher cause, we grow and people notice that. There'll be all sorts of ways we can cash in. We can get jobs we couldn't have done before. People take a shine to us who wouldn't have done before. We can trade in our quest for a big paycheck. But Xuanzang doesn't do that. He refuses to do that. And as a result, the king comes on his side. The king gives him 30 horses, 24 servants, 100 ounces of gold, myriads of silver pieces, 500 rolls of precious material to trade. Enough wealth to last him 20 years, travel wherever he wants. He also gives him 24 letters to 24 other kings, asking them to protect Xuanzang and give him horses. Xuanzang's commitment has attracted the help he needs. He's rich, he's protected by kings, he has warriors and servants at his command, both in his inner being and in the outer world. He's no longer a single scared monk on a skinny horse, he's a royal procession. So of course he makes it. He makes it to India, he makes it over the Himalayas, he makes it to India. He makes it to Nalanda, the greatest monastic university on earth, the greatest university on earth at the time, where he meets the man who clears up his questions about the true Dharma. He travels around India, gathers a huge collection of sutras and commentaries, then he retraces his steps back over the mountains, back through the desert, and returns to China, taking this huge collection of sutras in his backpack. But his return is very different from his setting out. He left as a sneaking fugitive on a skinny horse. He returns to a hero's welcome. Crowds turn out to greet and cheer him. The emperor chooses to forget that he ever forbade him from leaving, and commissions him to write a book about his travels. In fact, the emperor himself converts to Buddhism, and he turns to Xuanzang as his guide and teacher. Xuanzang buckles down to translating this huge pile of sutras, using the language skills that he's got, so that other people could benefit from this quest, which had been the point. In particular, he championed and he clarified a really sophisticated version of what's called the Yogacara approach to the Dharma, which went on to have a huge influence, a completely important influence on Chinese, Japanese, and Korean Buddhism. So he left this huge legacy, and he's still seen as a towering figure by Chinese Buddhists, so that more than 13 centuries after his return from India, I found myself ordained at a retreat centre called the Xuanzang Retreat Centre in, of all places, central India. So that's a very condensed version, I think. There's a lot more to it, but there's a very condensed version of Xuanzang's quest. What can we learn from it? What does it tell us about how we can access some of our hidden strength and energy, some of that hidden strength and energy that Xuanzang found to carry out his quest? I think first and most important, we can learn that we need to find our own deep purpose, what we're meant to be doing, and give that priority. Especially we need to give it priority over looking for comfort or security, which are the great enemies of life with a real purpose. Of course, we need to take on board that our purpose, our quest, probably won't be as dramatic as Xuanzang's. To other people, it might even look a bit ordinary. I have absolutely no doubt that some people's purpose is to have a family and look after them, find ways to look after them. That may not be yours. I have absolutely no doubt that that's some people's purpose. But they need to challenge it. They need to find it. We all have challenges to face, qualities we need to manifest. These probably won't make us famous like Xuanzang, but we all do have, if you like, a demon or a deep self that wants to communicate us, wants us to manifest through us, wants us to be what we could be, pushes us towards what we're meant to be and what we're meant to do. And if we stay in touch with that, and if we try as much as we can to find out what we're meant to do and then do it, then we will learn the key lesson of Xuanzang's life. So if we want to live out our quest, we too will probably have to convert from common sense Confucianism to Buddhism, to the higher wisdom of Buddhism, at least ethically. We'll have to leave the sensible ideas that maybe we've got from our family and education, which would give us a secure, comfortable life, which would stop us following our destiny. We too may have to go through a period of preparation when our task is formulating, as Xuanzang did, where we don't know what the dickens we're doing. Maybe this will last many decades. For Xuanzang, it somehow prepared him. One of the things that pointed towards it, he found out what he loved. He found he was fascinated by languages. And he was gifted with languages. He learnt Sanskrit and so on. He found out what he loved, and that pointed the way. He also toughened up. He got an overview of Buddhism in China, from which came a deep desire to get to the truth, a deep fascination with getting to the truth. All this pointed him towards his task, finding out what we love, finding out what fascinates us. So in the same way, we need to ask what fascinates me? What fascinates me? What do I love? What talent do I have? What has my experience fitted me to do? And that may point us towards what we're meant to be doing. And also, if we find ourselves in a situation where something needs doing for the good of other people or the good of the universe, we're on the spot, we have some of the skills and qualities needed, then that may well be the way of our deeper self, our daemon, telling us what to do. Saying, this is the task for you, at least at the moment. Then, after our period of preparation, after our period of following our nose towards what we're supposed to do, we may have to defy the emperor. We may have to turn a blind eye to what parents and friends and society and people at work think, and just do it. And then we need to pass through the Jade Gate, the point of no return. We need to burn our bridges, burn our boats, and commit wholeheartedly to what we're doing. At times that may seem to leave us alone and lost in the desert, but it will attract all sorts of forces. It will bring on stream our resources, our inner resources, and it will bring help from outside. But even having passed the Jade Gate, the king of Turfan may tempt us to stop halfway and trade it in for a big paycheck. So if we look for status or wealth, we'll be stopping halfway. But if we keep our faith and commitment, then the tempter will turn into a truly royal king and give us wealth and protection. We'll get what we need for our journey. We'll have found, if you like, our own inner power and wealth, our own energy and strength, and we'll be the sort of people who really make things happen. And I haven't got time to talk about Sangharakshita, but he made things happen, or we wouldn't be here. And he also displayed some of these qualities. Anyway, thank you.